Welcome, everybody, and thanks for being with us this next hour. You're listening to Everyday Astrology with C.A. Brooks on Transcendental Tuesdays here on 12radio.com. And we are simulcasting over on YouTube. And my channel is the same name as the radio show, Everyday Astrology with C.A. Brooks. So if you'd like to listen on YouTube, go on over there. We have a chat room open, and you can also make comments and questions during the show. So thank you so much for joining us today. This is April 21st. 2026. And it's a pretty exciting week, which we'll go into in just a minute. But I want to let you know my guest today is the amazing Mo Abdelbaki, Vedic Astrologer and Tarot Master. Now, ordinarily, he and I get together on the second Tuesday of the month, but we switched up our schedules. So that's who's with me today. And of course, he always has very interesting things to say. I hope that you catch his radio show, which is on Wednesdays, which is Mo's Paisley Penny Arcade. You can also hear that on 12radio.com and on YouTube. But also, he writes for Mark's Power Peak, which is the online digital newsletter that I'm always talking about, because I write the week ahead, in which I talk about all the astrology and the stuff going on that week. But Mo also has an article in that newsletter, so I hope you will subscribe. And this week, his article was very sweet, I thought. Simple, sweet, and just very timely. He was talking about gratitude. Now, I know that's something that we talk a lot about, but do we do it? And he gave some very concrete examples, and it's just always such a good reminder. So thank you, Mo, for having that article in the Power Peak this week. So what we're going to do before we get Mo on the show, we are going to talk for a few minutes about the cosmic dance for the week of April 20th. Now, I think this is the moment that we have been eagerly anticipating, because for at least 18 months, and maybe it's more accurate to say 2 years or more, astrologers have been discussing the fact that there's a cosmic shift going on. 4 of what we call those outer planets, the ones that are farthest from the sun, are making changes. They're moving from generally Earth, that grounded Earth energy, the sensitive water energy, and they're moving into fire and air. Fire is inspiration, motivation, action, and air is communication. It's mental energy. Now, I know a lot of us think, oh my God, life is already moving too fast. I mean, sometimes it does feel that way, doesn't it? But we do have this cosmic shift. And I say this is the moment we've been waiting for, because Pluto, the farthest out, now that's the planet that has been making that shift and already did it. He's already in earthy, or he came from earthy Capricorn into mental Aquarius. And there again, because of retrogrades, it went back and forth for a little bit. But actually, Pluto has been in Aquarius since December of 2024. And then in 2025, Saturn and Neptune left watery Pisces. Both of them were in water. They were in Pisces, and they moved into the fire of Aries. But there again, because of retrograde patterns, it kind of went back and forth a little bit. But now, at the beginning of this year, they finally made the commitment, and they are in Aries for the continuation of their patterns, which is for Neptune, that's another 13 years. And for Saturn, it's another 2 years. But the 4th planet that we've been anticipating is Uranus. Now, this is the planet of revolution, breakthroughs, and referred to as the Great Awakener. Think about it that way. Think about it wakes us up to the limitations, the restrictions, the barriers in our lives that for the most part are there by our choice. And there again, we can't change a lot of the events in our lives, maybe some of the things that happen, but we can always change how we're viewing them, how we're responding to them. So Uranus is the Great Awakener. And it has been in Taurus, earthy, traditional Taurus, for 7 years. And late last summer, it did what I like to call a scouting trip. because after 7 years, or almost 7 years, it moved into Gemini, but only for a couple of months. Then it retrograded and it went back in Taurus. And it's almost like, oops, forgot something. I'm not quite finished with what I was doing here. So it goes back into Taurus. But now, this week, on Saturday, April 25th, Uranus will make that transition to Gemini, which is an air sign ruled by Mercury, the planet of thinking and communication. And I personally think this is going to be a lot of fun. This is a sign that is versatile and communicative and fun loving. It's the sign of the twins. And Uranus is going to be there through May of 2033. Long time. We're talking about another 6 to 7 years that Uranus is going to be there. So I think we can honestly say we're no longer on the precipice of change. We are in the change. We've made the step. We've made the leap off the cliff, or whatever you want to call it. We're flying. We're in that energy now. And we're moving towards our future. We're in our future, so to speak. So we're not going to go in depth with Uranus today because I do have my guest, Mo Abdelbaki. And I thought he's a Vedic astrologer, and Vedic astrology does not use the planets Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. They go through Saturn. So I thought, let's focus on the sign of Gemini because he can tell us a lot about the mythology and what to expect and what this kind of energy is. And then next week, we'll start that more in-depth discussion about Uranus itself. But I think we're going to have some fun with Gemini. And I want you to always think of Gemini, use that word fun, because I think this is the youthful sign. My favorite image of Gemini is Dennis the Menace. And I like that because you know how Dennis was always saying, hey, Mr. Wilson, what about this? What about that? What about this? He was always asking questions. He was always wanting to know something. He was youthful and having fun. And one of my favorite quotes from that cartoon was when Mr. Wilson is just kind of flabbergasted. He goes, why do you have to ask so many questions? And Dennis said, because, and I don't remember if he said I'm 5 or 7, but he goes, I'm only 5 years old and I don't know very much stuff. And so that's how Gemini is very much in their lives. Now, Mo's going to give us a lot more ideas about that too. But this is a very Gemini week, or at least the spotlight is on Gemini, because do you realize Venus, the planet of values, also moves into Gemini this week. And that's no coincidence. It's just the way it works. I mean, not that Venus is always near Uranus by any means, but Venus is moving into Gemini, and that's going to happen on Thursday. And there again, Venus doesn't spend very much time in a sign, only about, like maybe 20, 30 days sometimes. But what's really interesting about this particular time of her transiting Gemini is the fact that she's right there next to Uranus. And I'm just very, very intrigued. I mean, I'd love to be a fly on the wall because literally 2 hours before Venus moves into Gemini, guess what? She's going to meet up with Uranus. And as we just said, Uranus is that planet of great awakenings, breakthroughs. And so I think Uranus is going to have quite a bit of influence on Venus. And I would love to hear what they're talking about. I mean, if I could imagine, what are they discussing? What are they going through? So this is going to be a really interesting transit of Venus through Gemini after she spent this time with Uranus. And I want you to know, and here again, we can go into some of this stuff, next week, but I think it could be a very both disruptive and enlightening kind of experience or few weeks when it comes to relationships. Now, don't assume that's good or bad. It could be the situation where somebody wakes up and says, you know what, I really want more from this relationship. I want to live together. I want to get married. Other people may go, you know what, I think this relationship has run its course. I think it's time for us to make a huge shift here. So does that mean a breakup? Does that mean a divorce? It could, but there again, don't blame the planets because all they're doing is waking us up to what's going on for us in our lives. What is serving as just a barrier? What is serving as, kind of that very stuck energy in our lives? So if follow, just listen to yourself, listen to your heart, listen to what's coming up for you. You don't have to make a rash decision, but recognize that if you're not feeling that you want some change in your life, when both of these planets are making major moves, or at least Uranus is making a major move, then you're not listening. Now, we're going to get Mo on the show, so I'm not going to belabor this, but I would say, there's so many people that, of course, were born with their Venus and Gemini, but a few of them share. The singer, Amelia Earhart, and look at how she lived her life. President John F. Kennedy was born with Venus and Gemini, and so was his wife, Jackie, which I find interesting. But in any case, we're not going to go there, but just something to think about. Also, Uranus and Gemini. And we'll go into some of these details next week, but the last time Uranus was in Gemini was basically 1941 through 1949. So if you think about this, this is a long period of time. And if you look at some of the people that were born during that period, we're going to see how they exemplify that energy. And some of the people I'm thinking about are both Paul McCartney and George Harrison were born during that period. Stephen King, Michael Crichton, Harrison Ford, but also in the previous cycle, Henry Ford, the automobile guy, the manufacturer of all those, just his name is synonymous with cars, which is a very Gemini function. Gemini is about transportation. So Henry Ford was born with Uranus and Gemini. So we're going to do that. Just gives you kind of a little tickle there. And also you'll find more if you do read my article in Mark's Power Peak. But we're going to talk about this. We've got a long time, 7 years, to talk about Uranus in Gemini. So let's get Mo on the show. Hey, Mo, are you there?
I'm
ready?
somewhere.
Are you ready? Are you
I'm
ready
somewhere.
to talk?
Where am I?
Are you ready to talk?
I'm ready. Absolutely. You know me. Always like to talk. So yeah,
Well, of
Dennis
course.
the Menace was one of my fixations as a kid. I even went one of my early Halloweens as Dennis the Menace with one of those flammable costumes.
What do you mean
One of the
flammable? Because it wasn't fire treated?
Oh, not even.
No, yeah.
They
Oh,
were
yeah.
they
Yeah.
were like nylon that if a spark got on them, they melted to the child, and had these
Yes.
tiny little masks that you couldn't see through, and they were incredibly dangerous, but it was a lot of fun.
But you were Dennis the Menace?
I was, because I
Somehow
loved
that
the show.
fits.
I loved the show, and I read the comic every day. I was just like a kid. I mean, tiny little kid, but
Hmm.
I'd laugh and laugh and laugh, and there was one comic I remember the best, with Dennis putting a root beer jug down the garbage disposal. And I decided I was going to try that, but I somehow got
Oh.
distracted. So, yeah.
Oh my
But
gosh. Well,
yeah,
I can
really.
really see it, Mo. I really can see you as Dennis the Menace.
I used to yell just out of nowhere, hello, Mr. Wilson, at the top of my lungs. And my parents finally broke me of that nasty habit. Hello, Mr. Wilson. It was just, he really affected me for some reason. I liked his spirit, you know.
Hmm. Well,
You know,
and when I say I can really see that, it's because of the curiosity. Of all the people I know, I mean, you have so many varied interests.
yeah,
So
yeah.
many different things. I mean, when I call you a Renaissance man, I really mean that because
Well,
you
thank
just
you.
know so many things, or you've tried so many things. You've dipped into so many things. And that is
Well,
so Dennis the Menace.
yeah, I've dipped into a lot of things. Probably I shouldn't have
Yes.
dipped into.
Well, but I mean, that's what life is experimentation.
Yeah,
And some of
it's
us, yeah, and some of us are a little more, willing than others. That's all.
that's right. Yeah, I'll try it. Go ahead, give me a couple. Anyway, next topic.
Yes. So do you want to talk about Gemini?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
I love Gemini. I married a Gemini the first time around. Yippee-yi-okay. It was,
Yes.
yeah. And pardon me. Um, yeah, it was yeah. Um, and it was nice. It was wonderful. It was
Yeah.
interesting. And but yeah, Gemini is interesting. I mean, the mythology of it is fantastic, quite interesting. Castor and Pollux,
Uh-huh. The
um,
twins.
the twins. Castor was mortal, um, son of the king of Sparta, I think, and Pollux was son of the king of the gods, Zeus. Um, he appeared to Leda, who as a swan, and had his way with her, and that they, you know, they the swan had an egg, and crack open the egg, and there was Castor and Pollux.
Hmm.
And so Castor is the mortal one, and Pollux is the immortal one. And Pollux wasn't that smart, as often was the case with the sons of Zeus and or the daughters of Zeus. Well, they were, but especially the sons. Hercules was a son of Zeus, not too bright, and but strong as could be. And Pollux was very strong and immortal. And so a sad story in many ways. But the thing is that Castor was incredibly bright, and he gave up. Pollux gave up his immortality because they loved each other so much that when Castor was going to die, he said, "I don't want to go on. I don't want to be immortal without my brother." So Zeus said, "Fine," and he put them up in the sky um, as the Gemini constellation, which is a really beautiful constellation that you can see in the summertime. So,
Mm-hmm.
can you see it in the summer or in the winter? Winter, yeah, I've seen it. It's up there,
Yeah.
and it's up there, not too far away from Taurus, which is see in the winter, because in the summer, in springtime, it's up there. It's in the sun's up there, and it's up. It's a fascinating constellation, big constellation, and the two stars, Castor and Pollux, are the ones that they named it Gemini after, and it represents the fact that twins, I think it means that they're never identical. You know, I have twin grandsons, and they're fraternal twins, and one is autistic and the other one is not. And I think that's fascinating. And the
Mm-hmm.
autistic one is a genius. He has a genius
Yes.
IQ. And the other one is pretty smart too, but he's also an incredible artist, like his dad. And it's fascinating to watch, and they love each other, but they fight all the time. But the thing about Castor and Pollux, the Dioscuri, as they call them, is that they became the symbol, or the, let's say, the um, not the muses, but the representations of memory and brilliance and thought, and that's quite interesting. And also horses. They became symbols of horsemanship
Oh, I
because,
didn't know that.
oh yeah, yeah, they were the absolute patrons of horsemen and horsewomen. They were into horses quite a bit. Double signs seem to have that connection to some extent, but mainly Sagittarius for obvious reasons.
Well,
And
right, which is the opposite of Gemini. So that's why that was
yeah,
intriguing. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And so it's kind of and very mental indeed. Castor, I always think of Mice and Men, Steinbeck's great
Mm-hmm.
novel, when I think of Castor and Pollux, because Castor was smart. He wasn't, they didn't roam around during the Depression, but and Pollux was just extremely strong, and he was a pugilist at times, but and a wrestler, and son of Zeus. You don't mess around with the son of Zeus. But so there is this kind of, it's yin and yang. It's the
Mm-hmm.
two sides of things, and I always think of that in Gemini, that there are two sides there, that you don't always see. I don't think you can always see both sides at the same time.
Right. In fact, I
Uh,
think a lot of times we don't, but we
yeah,
know the other side is there.
right. And that's something I think we should always think about. The other side is there, but maybe you cannot see the other side at the same time. Um, that was true in my case with my ex. I don't want
Hmm.
to talk about her because, God bless her. We have two incredible children, and I have grandchildren, and we have them together. And, you know, and in her own way, she's a wonderful person. And I pursued her, so it's all my fault, you know. But like I said, we have wonderful kids, and but I found out about Gemini, and I'm a Taurus, and
Uh-huh.
Tauruses get what they want often, most of the time.
Hmm.
We're stubborn
Hmm.
and persuasive, and Taurian. So, but what's your thought on Tauruses and Gemini? Should they be together?
Well, my first thought is that I don't really look at sun sign astrology. I don't give it a whole lot of weight when it
Right?
comes to relationships because I mean I will more often than not look at Mars and Venus and the moon and even Saturn for
Uh-huh.
looking at real compatibility. However, I don't see any reason why they can't be together, but when you look at Gemini as the sign following Taurus,
Right.
then you also realize that it's kind of, I don't know if the word is correcting, but it looks at the excess of Taurus, which is probably that very sedate. I want to do things slowly. I want to do things methodically. This is what I want. I'm planting myself here. So Gemini kind of rebels against that. And
Yeah.
Gemini's like, no, let's switch it up. And even those words, let's switch it up. I can see Taurus just cringing. Like, what do you mean switching it up?
She's
So,
one of the most brilliant people I ever met. Gemini, Gemini, Gemini.
mhm,
Just incredibly smart, you know.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. But that being said, and of course, I mean, I think it's so important that we don't look at any of the signs as smarter than others because
Oh,
it's just,
no. No, no.
I mean, and I say that a lot when I'm talking about Mercury because just because somebody speaks slowly or because somebody is methodical and thoughtful has nothing to do with intelligence. I mean,
Right.
as we all know, you can chatter, chatter, chatter and say nothing. But in any case, I don't see any reason why side by side signs aren't compatible. It's depending on some of that other stuff. But I can also see where Gemini says, hey, what are we going to do tonight? Let's get together with some friends. And Taurus is saying, hey, I just thought maybe we could stay right here and cuddle on the couch or watch a movie or
That's
let's just
right.
stay
Oh,
home
exactly. Yeah.
and,
And I think my Venus is in Gemini in the Western system.
oh,
So,
yeah. So
yeah,
that helps a lot.
because this Taurus is lazy. So, and then my next wife is an Aries. So talk about lazy. I just didn't want to leave the neighborhood. You know,
But you recognize that you needed that kind of jump start. You
I just
needed the
recognized I
will.
didn't want to leave the pasture.
Yeah, you wanted the willfulness of Aries, and then you wanted the brilliance of Gemini. Yeah.
That's right. I just realized that if I didn't have Aries energy, I was going to end up in a box on the street. You know?
Yeah. Well,
Oh boy.
and it's funny that you asked me that question because I was somewhere yesterday where a woman came up to me and she goes, hey, I heard your name in conversation. And I said, yeah. And she goes, yeah, we were talking about you the other day. And I said, why? And she said, well, because so and so was saying that you had done a reading for her and she just loved it. She said, so I just have to ask you, what do you think? And then she did the same thing. What do you think about a Taurus? I think she's a
Yeah.
Taurus marrying a Scorpio. And she said, because, or you know what, actually, what she also said to me is she said, did you choose the right husband?
Hmm.
Because you're an astrologer. And I
Hmm.
said, well, I'm not married, so I would have to say I did.
Yes, and I would say, "You're
Because I'm
damn right I
happy with
did."
my I'm happy with my decision. So I
There
would
you
have to say,
go.
yes, I did choose the right husband. And she kind of laughed and she goes, well, I'm just kind of learning about myself. And that's when she asked me, about this and this. But then she kind of confided, she goes, and I don't know how many times she's been married, but she started off telling me about husband number one, and then husband number two, and then husband number three, and husband number four. And then, the meeting started. And so I
Yeah.
don't know how many more there were, but she said, I want to get together and I want you to tell me why I made the choices I did. I was kind of like,
Oh, that would be fun. What
well,
a
it
fun reading.
will be, but I did kind of quickly say, well, I can't tell you why you made those choices. I can tell you what I think your preferences are and what you were thinking at the time. But I
See,
think
now
she's
that's
seeing
a challenge.
astrology as kind of like you just mix all the pieces together and then I come out and say, oh, you should be married to a Virgo. And I
No, you
don't
see,
think it's
that
that
would be a
simple.
fun reading. You'd say, "Here's why you did this, and here's why
Yeah.
you did that,"
Yeah.
and, "Oh, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good one that's a fun one to play with, not
Yes.
play, but to
But
put
it
the
does
pieces
sound like she
together.
was going around the zodiac trying all of them. So,
Yeah. I don't know. People are
yeah.
fun, and in
Yes.
Vedic, you do that stuff, you can tell people why they did this and why they did the kind of,
Mhm.
you Um, one of my closest friends is actually, it's about I don't have many friends left anymore. Our generation was pretty hardcore, but he's a clinical psychologist and actually headed up a department at a university for a long, long time. And we don't talk shop very often, but when we do, it's funny how things kind of fit together, you know.
Mhm.
He believes in what I do because I did a reading for him decades ago about his house, and it turned out that everything turned out to be right, which I'm sorry it did because it was kind of a money pit. But
Mm.
it's funny how, um, no matter what you call it, whether you call it astrology or tarot or psychology, the tools kind of are the same.
Yes, they
Yeah.
are.
And to have the respect of a man like him is really nice, you know?
Mhm.
Um, I've had, psychologists who were students over the years, that was really something, who actually used tarot in their practices, uh,
Mhm.
and some of them who used it who didn't mention it, but that's a different story.
Mhm.
It's funny how our society and I've always thought, "Gee, what makes psychology right and our model wrong?"
Right.
Have you ever thought that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, what makes
Absolutely.
Freud right,
I've
but
thought that
everybody
about a lot of things
yeah,
where people will believe the most outrageous things, and yet then they'll, say something to me about astrology being just so crazy. And
God,
I'll
I
go,
agree
"Uh-huh,
with you.
okay. Yeah, okay."
I agree with
Well,
you 1,000%.
yeah, and speaking of 1,000, that's what I usually say. As I said, do you realize astrology is actually based on thousands and thousands of observations?
Yeah.
And that's what the scientific process really is
Mhm.
once you watch and you see, and I mean, it started out with, hey, have you noticed how these new moon babies are blah, 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 or full moon babies or whatever, or, I mean, primitive peoples watched the skies very much so
Oh, yeah.
and started making assumptions based on what they were seeing, what they were feeling, what was happening. So I see actually astrology being very scientific because of being based on those thousands of observations and
Absolutely.
continual observations, which is why even to this day I continue, not very often, but I'll still buy new tarot books or I'll buy an astrology book. I want to see what somebody else is thinking, what are they feeling, what's going on for them. And I love just, in fact, I'm a sun sign Pisces, but my sun is sitting in the third house, which is the
Mhm.
Gemini house.
You
And
bet.
there's nothing, so as Mark would say, I'm an honorary Gemini. And
There you
there's
go.
nothing I love more really than collating a bunch of data. I
Mhm.
mean, looking at all, this person says this, and this person says this, and this person says this. And it's like, one little line in a book about a card, I mean, specifically the tarot cards, I just find it fascinating. They'll say one line, and I'll go, that is perfect for
Ah,
this card on this day.
see, now that you're a 19th century academician, because that's how they did it, you know?
Hmm.
Have you read, Fraser's Golden Bough?
No.
Yeah, oh, you'd like it because, that and Bullfinch's mythology, what they do is they gather all this information and they just beat it to death with citations and
Yes.
and that's what they do. And they say, okay, so and so says this, and so says that, and so does this, and it's like, wait a minute, why don't you just state it and get on with it? But
Hmm.
that was the 19th century imperative. You have to bring in other people's ideas of what happened to build your case.
Hmm.
And I've read so many books like that, and it's kinda wonderful in one way, but on the other way, you say, "Okay, just come on, give me the idea, and let me go on, and I'll form my own way of doing it." But it's funny, that's a and that but you love that stuff, and but you see, that is a very Gemini way because Gemini gathers information and
Yes.
synthesizes it.
Right.
My image of Gemini is of this meticulously, um, complex girder city.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
it's very I see it, and it's gleaming, but it's like skyscrapers that haven't been finished yet. Um, I don't know how to even but that's what I see. I see, like, these incredible structures, and they're beams and girders and they're incredibly beautiful and they shine and it's so complex and it's like synapses. That's Gemini energy to me.
Just sparkling.
Sparkling, exactly.
Yes.
And constantly moving and constantly changing. That is what Gemini is. I respect it. I honor it. Um, it's a remarkable image because it's so different than Taurus to me. To me, Taurus is this gigantic tree with this big
Hmm.
bull sitting underneath it. Just kind of, you know, you can irritate the bull, but if the bull charges, you're in trouble. But it's pastoral. It's just lovely. Um, there's not much going on. A storm comes through every now and then, but that to me is Taurus. But Gemini is the city.
Hmm.
But it's a city of gleaming. There's not cars, there's not honking, but there can be. But I just love Gemini energy. Um,
Yeah, no, what do you think about Venus and Gemini? What does that conjure up for you?
joy.
Ah.
Yeah, joy. It conjures up excitement. Um, it conjures up invention. It conjures up um, delight,
Hmm.
um, excitement, trouble.
Yeah, as one twin switches from the other to the
Yeah,
other.
to the other, to the other. Um, boredom could be a problem if that
Hmm.
happens.
Hmm.
You don't want to become bored during this period
Hmm.
because necessity is the mother of invention, right?
Hmm.
And boredom can cause some very different and bad inventions um, because that's desire. And when the mind gets involved with desire, there can be problems. When lust gets involved with desire, we can get ourselves into trouble. Now, maybe it's just me, but I mean, you know,
Yeah.
maybe not.
Well, but
Uh,
I was kind of thinking, and we're kind of on two different tracks, but yeah, the mind getting together with desire, I would
mhm,
see is that's when some people become very brilliant and inventive.
yes. And that's when some people become degenerates, So
Yes,
I
yes.
don't, I mean, I just, to me, Venus has two sides as well.
Hmm.
Uh,
Okay, and what are those two sides?
well, um, caring, loving, doting, protective, and then there is the um, degenerate side, the
Hmm.
side of lust, the side of um, having a
I
wee
want,
bit too much fun, huh?
I
What's that?
want,
I
I
want,
want, yeah.
but more than just want, I need, I
Hmm.
will have.
Hmm.
Because remember, Venus was the goddess of prostitutes.
Oh,
Um,
I didn't know that.
oh, yes, yes. That's where we get the word venereal disease from.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, and the temple of Venus had prostitutes,
Hmm.
and men would pay money to have sex with them, and it was one of the richest there was. She had
Hmm.
her temple had lots of money. Um,
Yes.
yeah, and
Well, and I'm going to throw this in too. I usually talk about this idea in terms of Virgo, but I'm going to throw it in here in terms of with the prostitutes. There's some ancient, I'm not going to call it mythology, but I guess it partially could be about temple virgins who were, I mean, in a sense, I'm not going to say prostitutes, but they could sleep with anybody they wanted because that was their choice. They didn't belong to anybody but themselves. So they got to make their choices. And see, I see that as Venus in Gemini also. That,
mm,
yeah, I can switch it up because I haven't made a commitment that I'm going to limit myself. I'm going to give my twins the option of doing what they want and making their own choices in the moment.
right.
And so I think, let's face it, it's kind of hard to spin prostitution in a positive or good way. But on the other hand, prostitution itself maybe is kind of this gray area culturally of what a society has done. But there is something very enlivening about the person who says, I belong to myself.
Right there
And
you
I
are.
will make my choices. And so you can look on the outside and say, oh, well, she won't settle down or she won't do this, that, or the other thing. But maybe it's I belong to myself. I mean, maybe
There it
that's where
is.
the person is coming from. So, and there again, when I think about Venus and Gemini, it's a very short period, but recognizing, trying to make a lot of rules and make people commit to something they don't want to is the very way to chase away your love, your relationship. People don't want to be tied down when Venus is in Gemini.
Well,
They
and
want
that's the
freedom.
thing. This is the 60th anniversary of the book that came out called My Body, Myself, and that wasn't that the name of it?
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
and I just heard that the other day.
60 years. Oh my
Yeah,
God.
and, it was revolutionary. I
Yes.
remember, um, it was quite scandalous, of course,
Mhm. Mhm.
and, and, the Summer of Love actually started in '65.
Okay.
And in San Francisco, that was Ken Kesey and the LSD 25, and Hunter Thompson was out there. The Hells Angels were doing their thing. And 66, 60 years ago, was a pretty big year. The Grateful Dead were playing in the streets of Haight-Ashbury district out there. They were living in Haight-Ashbury. And 67 is when tens of thousands of the youth of America focused in on the scene and went there and went all over the country to Los Angeles and went to Central Park and boom boom boom,
Mhm.
and that there was a lot of Venus in Gemini at that point because our thoughts were about love.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a lot of sex going on. My dad went to a um, convention. He was a veterinarian and taught at CSU at the time. And he went to a convention in San Francisco. And he came back and he was talking to my mom in Arabic because he thought I wouldn't be able to understand what he was saying. And
Right.
he said, he didn't want to say too much, but he said more than enough. I could understand it all. But there were people having sex in doorways,
Mm-hmm.
kids, hippies. And and he was just, and I was like, God, I wouldn't, he said, I'm glad this one didn't go because I had an opportunity to go. And I turned it down because I was only, I was too young, 13. And but my friend who was 13 went and and anyway, didn't turn out that well for him. But it was it was what it was. That's the double-sided aspect of it. It was really a lot of Gemini energy because it was two-sided. It really
Mm-hmm.
was. It was a lot of Piscean energy as well. You know,
Which another double sign.
right?
All those mutable signs are doubles.
Yeah, it was very much so. Um, it that was about fighting against the status quo in a way that was love based and peace based. And man, I remember it. I still feel that energy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I remember what it really felt like. I remember it because I was into it. I
Right.
was into it.
You lived it.
I lived it. I wanted it. Um, I I was that way my whole life. I always say I was kind of born into that love generation. I felt it
Mm-hmm.
from the very beginning. We were Leo, Pluto and Leo, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I felt it. I felt that sense of I don't feel like I belong to this other generation. And that Gemini energy to me was that twin mentality of saying, I don't feel like I belong to these people that I was born to, but I love them, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I care
But
about them.
don't you think that's always well, I know that in Vedic astrology they don't use Pluto, but Pluto is a generational planet that
Yeah,
on
for sure.
average it changes every 18 to 20 years. I mean on
Right.
average. And so we're always like a different sign than our parent. Well,
N-
almost always a different sign than our parents. And we're naturally going, once again, correcting for what we think is
Not
the
a, but
excess or the
no,
failings of that generation. So
but
yeah, Pluto.
no. Look at
But what?
Andy Hardy movies. Those
Yes.
Andy Hardy movies, those kids were imitating their parents. They
Well,
were
we all
wearing,
do.
but not our generation.
But
We
you know
weren't
what
imitating
was?
our parents.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I mean, I've thought about this so much. I watch old Andy Hardy movies with Mickey Rooney and Judy Garland, and he dresses like his parents. He idolizes his parents. They go to these functions and they act like them, and they pull these little flasks of liquor and they drink like their parents. And in our generation, we were dropping acid, you know, and we were
Well,
dressing
eventually, what I'm thinking is, I'm not saying the movies don't reflect society because they absolutely do, but the
right.
movies also reflected people's ideas of what they wanted it to be. I mean, think about all the censorship and how all
True.
those movies, every married couple slept in twin beds. But that
True.
wasn't the truth. And yet that's
No.
what you saw in the movies.
And there was a lot of premarital sex back then
Oh,
too, and back in the
always.
yeah, a lot
Yes.
of it. But when I'm thinking that we were so our generation, I was rebellious. I mean, I was rebellious when I was 5.
Hmm.
I was really rebellious. I was born that way. I was rebellious when I was just a tot.
Mhm.
That maybe is just me, you know.
Yes, but I'm going back to Pluto because as a generational thing,
Oh
all these
yeah,
Pluto and Leo kids are saying, no, this is about me. This isn't just about family,
exactly.
Pluto and Cancer.
And I
This is
believe in
about
that.
me, and I need
Yeah.
to do my thing, and I need to perform, and I need to be on stage,
So how
and
about the Pluto and Cancer kid?
I need to be recognized, you
Right.
know? And so that even though you wouldn't maybe see Leo as being so rebellious, of course they are,
Oh, of
because
course. I
they're kind of
sure.
trying to find their own identity
We
away
roared.
from the collective of Cancer. Yeah.
Yeah, we roared. I
Yeah.
mean, we were, and look at rock and roll, which was more than rebellious. It was scandalous, you know. And
Mm-hmm.
not that big band swing wasn't, but it was in a pretty, because that was black music, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Most of Benny Goodman's music was arranged by Fletcher Henderson, who had a black orchestra. He was black. And so the music that he was, it's like Pat Boone doing Little Richard music, you know.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I mean, and of course, in my opinion, it was nowhere nearly as good as Little Richard stuff. He was unhinged when it came to the way he did his songs. You know, they were just fantastic. But what happened in the '60s was just unprecedented, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Even, the Roaring Twenties was fueled by alcohol and and crime, frankly,
Mm-hmm.
alcohol and crime. Um, and there was a lot of sex in the Roaring Twenties, just a ton of it. I've spoken to old people; they were very frank. But what happened in the '60s was a complete overthrow of war and almost an entire way of doing things. And I never got in on the sex part, to be honest with you. It was just kind of sad, actually, um, but probably okay in another. I just couldn't see. And maybe I didn't have the confidence, but I also never trivialized it that way. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
I could never trivialize sexuality and okay, let's shake hands, let's have sex. I could never do that. It meant too much to me. Um, and maybe that's silly, but I just never could. I had friends who could, and I just thought, nah, not my thing. Um, and I saw what it did to relationships when it became nonchalant, and no matter how we tried to trivialize it and free love and this and that, it really destroyed people to try and do that. And I realized you couldn't do that. Um, I'm kind of wandering, but I think you get it, don't you?
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
and what I'm trying to remember is, especially in the late '60s, there were some really interesting planetary transits. I think specifically Uranus was with Pluto.
uh-huh.
And so if you go back, I mean, there again, it's always hard to isolate one thing and say, oh, that was it. But there were some really, like that was
Heavy
the
stuff.
seed. Yeah. And when you have two planets coming together, which Uranus did with Pluto in the late '60s, then you've got the seed of something. And here again, in Western astrology, that Pluto stands for
Oh, I believe in
transformation.
Pluto and Uranus,
Yeah. Oh,
absolutely.
I know you do. I just like to
Yeah.
differentiate and let people know that there are
Oh,
different
no, it's
ways of
good because
looking
I
at
don't
it.
use them. So,
Yeah.
but I do know they're there and I do understand.
Right.
But
Right.
here's what I really came to realize about it. You can't underestimate the power of Scorpio.
Hmm.
Scorpio is a major influence in our lives, and it will not be trifled with.
Right.
It's too powerful. It's
Yeah.
too it's this huge, gigantic energy in our lives, and you cannot toy with it. It's a monster at times. And that is proven by it will destroy if it doesn't destroy, if you toy with it, it becomes monstrous. Look at Hugh Hefner,
Mm-hmm.
who turned out to be, in my opinion, a monster. You know, um, he was this free. I never lie. I never lie. I tell the truth, and I do everything up front, and I do everything. And here's this expose of him. They did it. I don't know if you saw any of it, but they did
Mm-hmm.
this expose of him and what he did, and he really hurt a lot of women, a lot of women. And that's what Scorpio can do, you know. So in his attempt to live a free sexuality, he ruined a lot. He hurt a lot of people. And that's
Mm-hmm.
what you see, that's the problem with Scorpio, is that as it does so, it stings wildly. I mean, you look at the constellation of Scorpio in the sky, it is exactly what it's supposed to be. I can't look at Scorpio in the sky without seeing a scorpion because that's exactly what it looks like.
Mm-hmm. And by the way, for our audience, I assume Mo jumped to Scorpio because it's ruled originally in the Vedic system by Mars, but in Western astrology, it's ruled by Pluto,
Yeah.
the planet of transformation. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
and it's and you can't trivialize certain things in our lives.
Mm-mm.
And Venus, you can't trivialize Venus either. We like to just, slough off things like love. You can't
Yes.
trivialize
No.
love.
No. No. Hey, and you know what? We've only got a couple of minutes
Yeah.
left in the show. So, one thing I want to say is that we're actually coming up on what your moon is next week, the full moon in Scorpio on Friday, May 1st. Yeah, a little over a week from now. Hey,
Yeah.
so that was timely. But do you have any announcements that you want to make
Yeah.
before we close
I
the
think
show?
I'm gonna have a fun show tomorrow. It's actually gonna be on a spread I used to do all the time, which was the linear astrological spread in Tarot and the house determinative system that I used to use. So
Ooh, yeah.
that was a fun reading that I did. I did it for clients for years and years and years, and it allowed me to find anything at any time during a reading. So if they would say, my mother met a car dealer and I think she's going out with him and I want to know if he's a good guy or not, you could find it.
Oh, wow. Nice. That'll
Yeah,
be really interesting. And people can
yeah.
find you on YouTube, correct?
That's right. YouTube and on One Two
One,
Listen
two radio.
Radio. I'm sorry.
Yes,
Not
that
One
no,
Two
that's
Listen, One
okay.
Two Radio. Getting old.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, everybody. Well, that's a wrap
Thank
on
you.
today's show. Mo, thank you so much for
Oh,
joining me today and for
always
all
a
the
pleasure.
information. Always give me something to think about. Thanks to our producer, Serena. And I hope that everybody will stay tuned because up next is Empowerment with Kelly Whetstone. You can find her on 12radio.com or on her YouTube channel, Empowerment with Kelly Whetstone. And I will be joining her because this is our monthly meeting of the minds. And I do have one quote. Serena, just bear with me for a second. The quote of the week is by Michael Crichton, and with his Uranus sitting in Gemini. And this is from Jurassic Park. The history of evolution is that life escapes all barriers. Life breaks free. Life expands to new territories, painfully, perhaps, even dangerously, but life finds a way. And I just think that's a perfect line for Uranus and Gemini. So, everybody, thank you so much for joining me today, and stick around because I will be with Kelly. And you can also find me on 12listen.com and you can always request a scheduled call at a time that's good for you if I'm not available when you happen to check the site. You have been listening to Everyday Astrology with my guest Mo Abdelbaki on 12 Radio and live streaming on YouTube, where we are changing the way you listen to the planets and the signs and to the world.